What is a leader? What sets a leader apart from those they are leading? On this episode of the Working Cows podcast, I'm going to share a talk I recently gave at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's annual conference on the topic of leadership. We'll talk about the importance of courage.
Sometimes pioneer is just a nice way of saying insane. It's okay to look crazy, because 50 years from now, somebody's going to look back and say, that guy was a pioneer.
Tenacity.
Right? How many times have you failed at something the first time you tried it and said, I can't do that, I'm no good at it? Don't give up just because you failed the first time. Learn from it.
Vision.
We have to be able to see where things are going before anyone else does and make decisions that will help us avoid disastrous consequences or maximize positive results.
As well as the value of a vision and mission statement.
The value of a mission and vision statement is that it empowers us to say no to good ideas.
All of that and more on this episode 406 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by the Wineglass Ranch and Remedy Animal Solutions.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. Very excited to share with you today a talk I recently gave at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's annual conference. And this is going to become a yearly thing for them, I believe, having an annual conference toward the end of the year. I think they're going to continue to expand it, maybe even to 2 days later this year. So they're another advertiser for us this year, and you'll be able to hear more about that as we get closer to it, but maybe mark the end of your year for some continuing education at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's annual conference towards the end of 2025 here. Before we get into this talk on leadership, though, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor today, the Wineglass Ranch. As Tom Lassiter said, cattle breeding is a relatively simple endeavor. The only difficult part is keeping it simple. The Wineglass Ranch cow herd is the first step to profitability. They keep it simple, focusing on increasing pounds per acre and profit per acre. The genetic makeup of their herd is 70% Angus, 20% Hereford, and 10% Continental. Their cows have a moderate frame score of 3 to 4, topping in at 1,150 to 1,200 pounds as mature cows. They accomplish this by focusing on low milk and low maintenance cows that can breed every year and wean a calf without extra help, and adaptation. A cow that is adapted to a low-input style of management is more profitable than having management adapt to fit the cow. If you want to get your hands on these Wineglass Easy Keepers, you can do just that March 26th at Oglala Livestock. You can bid online, so go to workingcows.net/406 and find the links there to get registered to bid on the Wineglass Easy Keepers coming your way March 26th, 2025 at Oglala Livestock.
What is it that leaders are responsible to do in their world? You could answer that question with a lot of things, but I think that one of the things that leaders are responsible to do in their world is to manage the unseen before it becomes visible. We have to be able to manage the unseen before it becomes visible. We have to be able to see where things are going before anyone else does and make decisions that will help us avoid disastrous consequences or maximize positive results. And all of your resources are looking to you for leadership to do just that. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the 4 pillars of a ranching operation and how we can provide leadership to all of those pieces: land, animals, money, and people. There's your outline. Land, animals, money, and people. They are looking to you for leadership. How do you provide that? And I'm not going to spend as much time this afternoon on land and animals for a couple of reasons. First of all, you all love all of those things. Maybe some of you don't love money and people as much as you love land and animals, right? My dad always told me that you had to be 100 miles from home to be considered an expert. And so I moved 80 miles from anywhere. I drove 80 miles and didn't pass a gas station this morning. I drove 80 miles and didn't pass a Walmart this morning. I moved 80 miles from anywhere, so I was as close to being 100 miles from anywhere, so that wherever I went, I might have a shot at being an expert when I got there. But you can decide for yourself how that ends up. But let's start with our land. Land, animals, money, and people. If you can't remember it, it spells LAMP, L-A-M-P. Land, animals, money, and people. I'm not going to spend, like I said, a lot of time on these first two pieces because you love land and animals. And Dr. Tom Knopfsinger's here, one of the best to ever do it from a low-stress livestock handling perspective. And so it would be, I think, a little bit foolish for me to spend a lot of time there when you can go to his breakout session next door after I'm done here and hear more about taking care of them from birth on up. And so, well, let's dive in here to land. I think one of the first things that we need to do to provide leadership to our land resources is planned grazing. What we are doing in planned grazing is providing adequate recovery before returning. Wow, that's groundbreaking. That's a shocker. Nobody in this room's ever heard anything like that, right? Before. No? Yeah, exactly. So, but planned grazing, we're going to allow for adequate recovery before returning. And this is different than rest. Recovery means the plant has had a chance to fully recover. It isn't just that we stayed away for whatever recovery period we've determined is necessary. We've stayed away and the plant has fully recovered, because when we regraze plants before they've fully recovered, root mass dies off. And when root mass dies off, all kinds of other compounding and cascading negative effects start to happen. And so we want to avoid that at all costs. So planned grazing is how we can provide leadership to our animal resources. Here's another thing that occurred to me. If you're within 100 miles of here, maybe more if you're going farther north, but if you're within 100 miles of here, you are most likely a dormant season grazer. How many frost-free days here? Does anybody want to take a stab, shout out a number? When I did some research, I came up with 144 frost-free days. Your mileage will vary. So that means that in our zip code, our neighborhoods, the majority, and not really even a close amount of the majority of our days are not active growing season days necessarily. And so we're dormant season grazers, and so we want to figure out ways to maximize the positive impact of our animals on our land in the dormant season, because that's where we're going to spend the majority of our year. And I know once we get soil health cranking, we can photosynthesize more days than that, and that is awesome. But when we start out, we need to think about how much of our year is actually dormant season grazing. I think one of the tools in our toolbox from a planned grazing perspective is planned disruptions. And this is a list from Dr. Alan Williams of planned disruptions. But we could talk about changes in paddock shape. Do you usually build square paddocks? Try a rectangle. Do you usually build rectangle paddocks? Try a square. And the change in paddock shape accomplishes different things in the paddock. When we change the paddock shape, we're accomplishing different things than we can in other shapes. And so long, narrow paddocks tend to increase the trampling of the grass and getting more of that armor on the soil and getting the grass and the litter in contact with the soil surface. We can try changes in paddock size. Do we build the same size paddock in the same place every year? We want to plan a disruption in our grazing to change the paddock size. All of these things, all of these disruptions can allow different microorganisms, different plant species to express themselves on the landscape. So we want to change stock density. Sometimes we might want to try a very high stock density if we're trying to accomplish certain things. Sometimes we might need to have a lower stock density if we're trying to accomplish other things. We want to switch up our change in rest period. This goes back to some of the basic things like not grazing the same place at the same time every year, giving those plants a chance to grow at different seasons of the year. That's changes in season of use. Changes in nutrient location. Do you put your salt and mineral in the same spot in the paddock every year? Are there opportunities to move that and place that somewhere else to get impact in a different area? Or if you have a more temporary set of infrastructure, you might even change where the water's at. You might even use some above-ground pipe in the summer to change where the water's located to accomplish these different things. Changes in utilization. There's a lot of people in the world practicing what's called total grazing. And do I think that any one of these things is what you should do every year? No. Because if you're doing one of these things or all of these things every year, first of all, you're probably working yourself to death. Secondly, if you're doing any one of these things every year, it's a prescription, not a disruption. And we want to avoid prescriptions and find ways to bring about disruptions. But there's a lot of people in the world practicing total grazing. And total grazing is where we remove 90%, and somebody's going to twitch a little when I say that, and remove 90% of the above ground biomass. And what does that mean? That means you have to stay away for a really long time to let that fully recover. It's an option. It's a tool. It's not what you should do everywhere, every year, but it's something that you might try in a certain place at a certain time for a certain reason. It's a disruption. It's not a prescription. Changes in species order. And some of you are sitting here thinking, well, I don't run multiple species. If you have horses, you do. And if you're grazing your horses, you could graze them either ahead of or behind the cows, depending on what your goals are. And I think that diversity, we talk a lot about getting more diversity on the landscape, but then we talk about diversity a lot of times in everything but the livestock. We're all for diversity, but we want diversity in everything but the livestock, where we're missing out on a lot of things going on the soil surface and below the soil surface because we don't have diversity in our livestock as well as our paddock, as well as our places. We can do bale grazing. We can do burning. Again, probably not every year in the same place, but some places it's the right tool at the right time. So planned disruptions. I want to do a little exercise with you. I want to ask you what's wrong with this mission statement. At Cattle Creek Pastures, we seek to improve the resources entrusted to us by God. We do this by optimizing the low-stress interface of livestock with the landscape to constantly increase their positive ecological impacts and by investing in deep relationships with the people joining us on this journey. Does anybody see anything wrong with that? It is wordy, but I'm a preacher, so you're going to get wordy. I'm sorry. Here's the problem with it. You could nail this. You could absolutely crush this mission statement and go broke doing it. You could crush this mission statement and go broke doing it. I put it here in the talk because it deals all with the ecology. And so Donald Miller, in his excellent course, Business Made Simple, says that every mission statement should include 3 key economic objectives that drive revenue for the business. So here's an example of something that would fit that bill. At Cattle Creek Pastures, we seek to sustain the improvement of the resources entrusted to us by God. We do this by effectively marketing 200 steers, 100 replacement heifers, 80 cull cows and bulls. We also focus on optimizing the low-stress interface of livestock with the landscape to constantly increase their positive ecological impacts and investing in deep relationships with the people joining us on this journey. I said the outline is land, animals, money, and people. Well, that previous mission statement had land, animals, and people, but no money. Does that sound familiar? That's a problem. That's a stressful situation to be in. We want to see if we can avoid that stressful situation and work these things into our mission statements. Next, providing leadership to your animals.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Remedy Animal Solutions. Remedy Animal Solutions can help you transition to a drug and vax-free operation. Their natural and organically qualified homeopathic formulas meet customer demands for a clean meat source. Their formulas are more effective, less expensive, and safe to handle while easily integrating into your ranching operation. Their Pro Vitality formula improves mineral absorption, reducing tie-ups, worm effectively without chemicals, eliminate respiratory challenges, and enhance breeding success, diminishing open cows. No need for needles or antibiotics. Foot rot, pink eye, lice, lump jaw, retained placenta, all can be treated without drugs with their first aid kit providing immediate homeopathic solutions on hand. They have formulas for cattle, sheep, horses, swine, poultry, and bees. Visit their website, remedyanimalsolutions.com, or call to get a personalized protocol for your business at 406-777-7375. You can also find links in the show notes page today to 2 previous episodes discussing Remedy Animal Solutions and what they have to offer for your operation.
Providing leadership to your animals. This is low-stress stockmanship. They're looking to you for leadership. And it's always kind of been funny to me. We talk about low-stress livestock handling, and we would assume generally that we're smarter than the livestock we're handling, right? Sometimes that's a safe assumption, sometimes not. But we would assume that we're smarter than the livestock we're handling, and so we probably know what we want them to do before they do. And so we need to be patient and give them time to figure out what it is we're asking them to do and give them the proper body language and all of those things that Dr. Tom's going to share with you later so that they figure out what we're asking them to do without us having to use force and fear to accomplish it. According to Bud Williams, morbidity, or the death of livestock, is a drop in the bucket when compared to the productivity losses due to stress in the animal's life where they didn't actually die. Now, my high school career would tell you that not turning in homework is hard on your GPA, right? So a 0 is hard to recover from, right? When you get a 0 on assignment, not good for the old GPA, huh? So a dead animal is a 0. Right? That's no return to the business unless you're dragging that carcass to a hard pan spot where depending on the price of nutrients today, the NP and K, $700 worth of NP and K in that carcass can dissolve into the hard pan spot. It's absolutely no return to the business if that animal dies on the place. And that's easy to see. But what isn't easy to see is that the productivity losses, according to Bud Williams, are a drop in the bucket compared to, the morbidity is a drop in the bucket when compared to the productivity losses due to stress where the animal didn't die. So if we can figure out ways to reduce stress and have them in a content place where they are continually on the gain, as much as possible, we see massive economic returns to our businesses. The second thing that we should know about low-stress livestock handling, according to Richard and Tina McConnell, I was recently talking to them, and I think it was Richard that said, one thing I've learned in low-stress livestock handling, low-stress stockmanship, is that the animals are never wrong. And so what I learned in that conversation was that we seek to get momentum before we seek to show them where we're going. So when we go into a paddock, when we go into a pasture, when we go into an enclosure. We just want movement. We want movement first. And then, once we have movement, we can start to influence their direction. And their movement, the good movement, draws good movement, right? Their movement can attract movement from other parts of the pen or the paddock or the pasture. And they come and join, and we pick up stragglers here and there, and then we start to direct them where we want them to go. So we don't go in there and say, we're going to the gate, and we're going to go to the gate right now. No, we go in there and we start getting movement. We start getting momentum. We pick them up, and then once we've got them moving, we start to direct them where we want them to go. And again, it's incredibly nerve-wracking to talk about stockmanship in front of Tom Knopfsinger, so I'm going to move on. But managing the unseen before it becomes visible. That's what we're talking about. Morbidity is a drop in the bucket when compared to productivity losses due to stress where the animal didn't die. We want to be leaders. We want to manage the unseen before it becomes visible. Did you know that animal was sick for the however long it was sick before it started showing? No. How much of its illness was caused by stress in its life? According to what I heard this morning, quite a bit. Next, we'll talk about providing leadership to your money. Providing leadership to your money. Our ranches are businesses. We are business owners. Whenever you hear somebody talk about why they're in ranching, what one word always comes up? Lifestyle. Every time. Lifestyle, lifestyle, lifestyle. And what happens is we tolerate poor returns on the investment of our time and our talent and our treasure because it's a great lifestyle. We shouldn't do that, first of all, because it can become extremely stressful. And secondly, we don't have to do that. We are business owners. Our ranches are businesses. And we oftentimes beat ourselves up because we think it's just us ranchers that aren't good at business. We're the only ones. Every other sector, they're killing it. They're doing really good at running their businesses. But I've been in a lot of different sectors. My wife and I ran a coffee shop in Belle Fourche for 10 years. I've been running the Working Cows podcast for just over 7 years now. And as part of that venture of running the Working Cows podcast, I joined a group of other podcasters recently to try and figure out how to make our podcasts more discoverable so that people can find them easier, right? And during one of those conversations, there was a gal on there who was running a podcast for interior designers. And I thought I had clicked on the wrong Zoom link, and I ended up in a ranching for profit discussion. Because this lady said, there are so many people in my industry that love the business. They love the sector. They love interior design, but they have no idea how to run a business. I'm like, where have I heard that before? And so just know that every sector has businesses that run their businesses because they love the sector. They love what they're doing, and they tolerate poor returns on their businesses because of it. We don't have to do that. We can see good returns for our efforts in our businesses. I ran this quote by a couple of people who I would consider to be some of the smartest minds in the ranching industry. And I know this might be heresy or heterodox at the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's annual meeting, but they both agreed. And they're right in line with y'all on soil health and all those things, okay? I said y'all, I am from South Dakota. South Dakota, yes. So, anyways, they agreed with this statement. It's easier to outbusiness a bad grazing plan than it is to outgraze a bad business plan. It's easier to outbusiness a bad grazing plan than it is to outgraze a bad business plan. What do I mean by that? I mean that if we take the time to analyze our businesses and make a plan for our marketing, and make a plan for our investments, and make a plan for all of these areas, we can succeed even if our grazing plan isn't great. Now, why not both, right? If I should have put the meme in here. Why not both? Why not both? Why don't we do both? Well, we should. We should do both. But just know that if you think that the only lever you're going to use in your business is the grazing lever, you're never going to be as successful as you could in the ranching business. This is an illustration of the idea from Ranching for Profit. We want to spend more time planning. We want the windshield, the viewable surface of the windshield, to be the amount of time in our businesses we spend planning. And we want the reflective surfaces, the mirrors, the rear view and the side view mirrors, to be the amount of time we spend reflecting on what happened in our business. Is reflection valuable? Yeah. How many calves were born? How many cows did we get bred? What percentage of the cows that were bred brought a calf to weaning? Those things are great to know. Those are good things to know. But then feed that information into a plan that says, okay, next year, how many calves could we reasonably expect to sell? What could our reasonable return for those sales be? And how are we going to maximize that? And how are we going to use that for investment in the future growth of this business? I think one of the biggest levers that we can push in our ranch businesses is marketing. Every successful business, regardless of sector, knows the niche they are serving. Every successful business, regardless of sector, knows the niche that they are serving. And I'll go back to the podcasting industry. When I started to try and educate myself about how to run a podcast, I took a course. I took multiple courses, watched multiple videos, lectures, and every single one of them said, you need to know your target audience. You need to know the niche that you're serving. And you need to define that niche very specifically. And I mean, like, there's some people that get really crazy with that, like down to the kind of car they drive and down to all these different details about their life. For example, in the direct-to-consumer beef business, or people that are marketing proteins to the end consumer. I was talking to a guy the other day, Alex Russell, I think it was episode 383 of the Working Cows podcast, and he said he knows his target market and she has a name. Her name is Suburban Sally. And she drives a Chevy Tahoe. And she's got 3 kids under the age of 10. And 2 of them are in soccer. And so when she gets home at night, she wants something that she can pull out of the freezer and have on the table in under 30 minutes. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about knowing your target market. Know who you are selling to. Who is buying from you? For most of you in this room, it's not JBS, Tyson, Cargill. It's not a Packer. It's a backgrounding lot. It's a feedlot somewhere else. It's a wheat pasture in Kansas. So oftentimes we convince ourselves that we need to manage for, and we need to buy genetics for high marbling and all of these things, and good carcass traits. Those aren't your business. Those aren't your customers. Those people aren't buying the beef from you directly. And so if you want to sell directly to them, then you've got to retain ownership, and then you can get the benefit for that. But you need to know your target audience, your target market. Call them. Pick them up. Say, hey, when do you find yourself short on cattle? When do you find yourself running out of cattle? When would you like me to sell you these cattle? What would you like them to weigh? What color do you want their hide to be? When do you want them delivered? What shots would be good for them to have when they're coming to your place? Do some market research. Every other business does. We can too. And we can experience a greater return for that. What if you called a packing plant that packed cull cows and said, when do you find yourself running out of cull cows? to meet the market demand? What if I brought you a trailer load? How much would you pay me for that? What if I brought you a semi-load? What if I brought you 5 semi-loads? Figure out where that return on investment winds down and then maximize. We need to know who our customers are, and some niches are more crowded than others. Some niches are more crowded than others. We heard it earlier today. Luke wanted to be a dentist so that he would have enough money to have 50 cows, right? The cow-calf sector, let me just tell you this. The cow-calf sector you're in competition with a lot of doctors and lawyers who can afford to do it at a loss. That's maybe a tough pill to swallow, but I've already said controversial things and nobody's thrown anything at me, so I'll keep going. And so we need to figure out who our target audience is and market directly to them as specifically as we can. Find out what they're looking for. We need to know who we are. Don't ask your business to be more than it is, and don't ask your people to serve a customer they despise. I'm going to talk more about the first one than I am the second one. Don't ask your business to be more than it is. I have talked to many people in the course of the Working Cows podcast, and some of them have been the largest scale, what I think many of you in this room would agree, most successful ranch managers in the business. And a few of them have told me things like, you need to be running somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 cows per full-time employee. You need to be running somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 cows per full-time employee. Now, that's very specific. It's a prescription. Your context is different. All of that. Caveat, caveat, caveat. Okay? But just think about that. Just as a thought experiment, think about that. Okay, so if I'm only running 200 cows, that means I should only spend a quarter of my time on the cow herd, and I should figure out a way to spend the other 3/4 of my time. Right? That's all I'm trying to communicate with this idea. And so we can develop skills to help. We can develop skills to help fill in the gaps. Skills like canning and gardening are skills that can reduce the cost of your living. Now you're like, I can't compete with Walmart on what a can of green beans costs. Well, if you have to drive 80 miles to get there, maybe it's a little easier to compete, first of all. Secondly, I know exactly what was on every green bean in the canning jar, in the canner at my house. I don't know that I can say the same for the canned green beans at Walmart. So those are skills that can reduce the cost of living. They can increase the quality of life. But look at this. I just threw all this up. Stream of consciousness, started typing out other skills that we could use. And a lot of these are skills that are complementary. I have 3 half-finished construction projects at my house right now. If anybody knows somebody who would come and sleep in my camper for a week and finish them, we pay cash. Okay? But like construction, for example, you could fill in the rest of your time with construction jobs. Oh, I don't like doing that, so don't. You could become a farrier. You could shoe horses, travel around shoeing horses for people. The closer you get to the Black Hills, the more necessary that is, right? If you're going to run cows on a range in the Forest Service, you probably should have some shoes on those horses. You could do leather work. You could build saddles. You could do consulting. You could become a mechanic. You could work on investments, whether that's trading stocks in the stock market or other investments in your neighborhood. You could buy office buildings, right? All kinds of options. You could get into real estate. I talked to a guy, an episode that'll come out soon, and him and his wife have bought a few houses in their town, and they're running rental properties. And it's generating great returns, has all kinds of benefits for them. They even have a vacation home at a lake that's rented out most of the time, and then they go and use it sometimes. These are just examples of what you could do the other 3/4 of the time. And your mileage will vary. You see that last one there? Keeping secrets. That was my dad's skill. Okay? That was my dad's skill. So, like, what's this? What is this? Pop quiz, hot shot. What is this? It's a pitchfork, right? Yeah, yeah. And that? Oh, man, you guys are 100% so far. And then this. It's a lick tub, right? No, you guys are all wrong. At my house growing up, that was the TMR. That was the total mixed ration wagon right there, those three things. We had a huge pile of ground hay, and we had 50 to 100 calves looking at us thinking they wanted to eat. And we would take this, and we would chip off chunks of that ground hay into that bucket, and then we'd carry it to the calves and dump it out. And then we'd dig way back into the hole and try and chip off a chunk so it would fall on our brother while he was under there. It was great fun. And then we'd take this 5-gallon bucket and we'd go fill it up with corn and we'd top dress that line of feed. So my dad's skill was keeping the secret from me that mixer wagons existed. I didn't know that we could have gotten all that done with hydraulics and horsepower. And I never complained. Well, maybe I did a little bit. But my dad we'd finish that and he'd say, oh, look, now you won't have to go to the gym. I'm like, yeah, that was really something I was worried about, that I was going to run out of things to do. But keeping secrets, maybe that's your skill. Don't let your family know that there's a mechanized, hydraulic-powered way to do this that will save us lots of labor. Maybe that will make the difference in your business. You see that last one says look for scalable skills. Now, a lot of these on this list aren't scalable skills necessarily. But if you develop the passion for them, maybe they could grow into a scalable skill where you could bring somebody on underneath you to execute those as well. I've talked to a lot of people in their 80s and 90s. And a common theme is that sometimes success is really just being too dumb to quit. Sometimes success is just, I refuse to quit. And that's okay. But failure is okay too. We learn more from failure than we do from success, right? What do we do when we succeed? We have a party, right? What do we do when we fail? We ponder. What could I do differently next time to avoid that? Because that hurt, and that wasn't much fun. Tony Robbins, that's kind of his matrix there. He said, when we fail, we are turning to the learning. We're turning to the learning. And then he had this quote, and I love it. He says, how many times will you let your child fail at walking before you tell them to give up because they aren't a walker? Right? How many times have you failed at something the first time you tried it and said, I can't do that. I'm no good at it. We shouldn't do that. Don't give up just because you failed the first time. Learn from it. What was it? Plan, monitor, measure, replan. Right? We want to replan, reassess, try it again. Right? Finally, providing leadership to your people. We need to provide leadership to our people. Proverbs 29:18 says, when there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint, but the one who keeps the law, blessed is he. When there is no prophetic vision, people cast off restraint. People, when we don't have a vision for where we're going and people in the business don't know where we're headed, they go everywhere. They feel like, oh, I'm free to go everywhere and do anything. Nothing is off limits. And it's really hard to be successful if you're not focused. And so we want to develop a vision. We want to develop a mission. And we want to communicate that. This is where we're going. This is our target market. This is what we're shooting at. This is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to do that. The value of a mission and vision statement is that it empowers us to say no to good ideas. When we have a mission and vision statement, we can look at it and say, does that fit into our mission and vision statement? Nope. Was it a good idea? Yep. Are we going to do it? Nope. Doesn't fit. We're focused. This is where we're going. This is where we're going. So we need to know where we're going. Do you know the target you are aiming at? Do you know what success looks like? When we go about developing these mission statements, we need to have all hands on deck. We need to have all hands on deck. Every stakeholder in the business should be involved in setting your mission and vision statement. You're not God or the expert. You need a team around you to look at it from their perspective, see it with their eyes, and ask questions. Hey, what about, are we going to take vacation? Is that going to be part of our mission and vision statement? And I don't mean going to the South Dakota Grassland Coalition annual meeting. And I don't mean going to Ranching for Profit. And I don't mean going to the Soil Health Academy. That's not what I said. Are we going to take a vacation? Right? Can we take a vacation on the way home from Ranching for Profit or the Soil Health Academy? Maybe. Maybe that's a good idea. Don't put up the lights in your cattle working facility if somebody suggests that. Only a small set of ranch businesses need lights in their working facilities. If you have them, you might be tempted to use them. Right? There's no reason, almost no reason to work cows after dark. Sometimes there is, but almost no reason. It's okay to look crazy, right? This is Dave Ramsey, right? Dave Ramsey says, if all your friends are broke, it's okay to look crazy. You don't want to be like everybody else. You don't want to be broke. Sometimes pioneer is just a nice way of saying insane. Somebody who's doing something out of the box, somebody 50 years from now might say, those guys are pioneers. Yeah, everybody in the neighborhood said, that guy's insane. What is he thinking? Let me give you an example. This is from the South Dakota Air and Space Museum, Ellsworth. If you can get that tour guide right there, this feller right here, do it. He's a heck of a tour guide. Make sure he tells you a story about flying a B-1. That's a great story. But in the background, you see this balloon, and then this little ball right down here. I zoomed in on it so you can see it. That's to scale, okay? That's to scale. This balloon was launched from the Strata Bowl just south of here on July 28th, 1934. 7 hours into the flight, at 59,000 feet, the balloon ripped. And the pilot and the scientist on board bailed out when it got down to 10,000 feet. So they rode a falling balloon for 49,000 feet. And then they bailed out. Kepner, the pilot, bailed out at 10,000 feet. Stevens bailed out at 3,000 feet. And they landed in a cornfield in south central Nebraska. Might have been Binkelman, I don't know. But here it is with them on the outside. So not a huge vessel, right? There it is in the Strata Bowl, just south of here, in the Black Hills. And I think some of these little dots you see around the outside are cars or trees, just to put it in perspective how massive this thing was. Okay? So what happens? They fail. You quit, right? I'm not a good balloon rider. That's what you do, right? Well, one guy did, because he wasn't insane. But the other one, Stevens, he was the scientist. He went back, November 11th, 1935. Anderson and Stevens reached a height of 72,395 feet. This was the highest anyone had ever been. Both of these times were the highest anyone had ever been off of the planet Earth in recorded human history. It's insane. Do you know what modification they made, other than a new balloon, for the second trip? They decided, hey, you know what? That could happen again. We should try to institute some safety precautions. So they went to the Rapid City High School and got a football helmet from the Cobblers, it looks like. I don't know if they were called the Cobblers in 1935, but that's what they did. It's okay to look crazy, because 50 years from now, somebody's going to look back and say, that guy was a pioneer. Or gal. If the axe is dull, Ecclesiastes 10:10 says, if the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. Insert into that sentence, he must use more force. Or, in your stockmanship, use more fear. But wisdom brings success. We want to do whatever we can to avoid managing in a crisis. We want to do whatever we can to avoid managing in a crisis. Take time to make the small investments, sharpening the axe, so that it is ready to use when you need it. Crisis decisions generally are hard on land, animals, money, and people. And they aren't very good decisions, because when you are in a crisis, you are left with no good options. Let me illustrate this. If you can't tell from my clip artwork, that's a funnel. That's a funnel. And when we operate in reactionary management, the decisions available to us get smaller, not bigger. Right? We're being funneled down to we're running out of options. And by the time we get to the end of that funnel, we're left with no good options. We could call this crisis management. Proactive management increases the decisions available to us. And so we want to start making decisions before we need to, so that we've got the whole world of opportunities and options before us. And when we have a plan ahead of time, before we're going to market, we have opportunity to make a better decision. There's all kinds of options. Where are we going to go? Oh my goodness, we had a 72% breed up. Where are we going to go with all these cull cows? Well, we've got a plan. We're going to call that cull cow packing plant. We're going to ask them when they want them. And we've got a year of hay sitting here as a safety valve, and we're going to use some of that to get them from where we are to where that cull cow packing plant wants them, and we're going to bring them the perfect cows that they're looking for at the perfect moment when they're really running low, and they're going to pay top dollar for them. Just an example. So, we want to avoid having to use more strength. We want to use wisdom and make a plan so that we don't have to use more strength. Our goal as managers is to manage the unseen before it becomes visible. We want to manage the utilization of our land before the desertification happens. We want to manage the stress of our animals before the illness starts. We want to manage our money before the foreclosure notice is in the paper. We want to manage the relationships of our people before the Thanksgiving table gets flipped over. Sorry if anybody's got some PTSD on that one from last week, but it's an example. Our job, one of the ways to describe our job as managers, is managing the unseen before it becomes visible. Thank you for your time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that talk. It was an honor to be asked and somewhat intimidating to give a talk to a bunch of already established grass managers and none other than Tom Knopfsinger sitting in the crowd while I'm talking about stockmanship. So that was a little bit of an intimidation factor, but it was a fun challenge, and I hope it was a blessing to you as well. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, got an episode with Josh Kirpin, and he is starting a coaching network and starting to offer coaching services for businesses. And he's been on quite the journey over the last number of years of scaling his agricultural operation. And basically, Josh has worked himself out of a job by developing leaders in his own operation. And so now he's freed up, he's got margin to go out and consult and help other people work towards their goals. And so we're going to talk with Josh more about that on the next episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.